Back in 2024, Oticon released their Intent hearing aids, and over the past 2 years, I've probably fit more of those devices than any other hearing aid on the market. And while I absolutely loved, and still love, the Oticon Intent hearing aids, they're not perfect for everybody. But that's about to change. Not because I don't still love those hearing aids, but because Oticon just released their new Reveal hearing aids with some nice improvements that are going to take their place, and we're about to find out how much better these devices are than the Intents and if they make sense for you. Hey guys, Cliff Olson, Doctor of Audiology and founder of Applied Hearing Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona. And in this video, I'm doing a detailed review of the new Oticon Reveal hearing aid. All right, let's go ahead and quickly talk about Oticon's philosophy called brain hearing and how that guides their technology development. Brain hearing is Oticon's belief that the brain wants and needs to have access to a more complete sound environment in addition to making speech easier to separate from noise rather than simply eliminating all surrounding sounds. This all really started back around 2014, but became really popular with their Oticon Open hearing aids in 2016, and they've stuck with this philosophy ever since. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're trying to eliminate all of your environmental sounds just to focus on speech, then the Reveal hearing aids probably are not for you. However, if you're looking for a hearing aid that sounds more like how someone would hear naturally, then the Reveal might be exactly what you're looking for. Now, before I get into all of the new technology inside the Reveal hearing aids, like the dual AI, feedback management, and wireless connectivity, let's focus on some of the basics. Now, just so you know, I will have this video broken down into chapters, so if any portion of this video is boring you or you just want to skip to the parts that you're really interested in, you can go down into the description and click on the timestamps. Okay, so let's start with what these hearing aids actually look like. Now, if you're familiar with the Oticon Intent hearing aids, these will look very familiar to you because they look literally identical. They use the exact same mini-fit detect receiver wires and a micro shell detect embedded receiver custom ear mold. That's what I have on here right now. Let me go ahead and show you. These are the receiver wires that use the rubber domes. Now, just in case you were unaware, Oticon actually changed the orientation of the curvature of these receiver wires to contour with your ear canals better. And this does create a better physical fit, in my opinion, depending on the shape of your ear canal though. One thing I'm not a big fan of is that because of the way that this receiver tip is designed here, you can really only use Oticon domes. So if there's a different dome from another hearing aid manufacturer that fits your ears better, you can't use them. Another thing that I'm not crazy about from Oticon in general is the retention filaments are incredibly flimsy on their hearing aids. They hardly hold the tip of the receiver into your ear canal at all. In fact, I often take other manufacturers' retention filaments and try to fit them on the Oticon receivers because if I don't, we run into major retention issues. They really need to make those thicker and more rigid. They actually changed the orientation of the ear molds so they're on a 90-degree angle with the wire. This was done in an attempt to force the wire to contour around your ears better. But all it did was make it significantly more difficult to insert these ear molds into your ear canals if you have finger dexterity issues. This is a big issue that Oticon needs to fix with their ear molds. That being said, let me go ahead and show you what they actually look like inside of my ears. And I've got to say, I really like how their custom ear molds are so small compared to some other manufacturers, but super comfortable as well. And if they could just contour the wires a little bit better, I would give it a A++. But this is how it looks like behind my ears with this particular color. Now, Oticon did introduce a new color to the Reveal hearing aids, and that new color is Deep Plum. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to see the color of Deep Plum, but I don't think that that color would go very well with my skin tone. Now, you may or may not be familiar with technology levels inside of hearing aids, but the Oticon Reveals come in 4 different technology levels. The top tier level 1, the second tier level 2, you also have level 3 and level 4 at the bottom. Now, the important thing to understand about technology levels is that each time you go down in level, it takes features and customizations away from your hearing care professional when they're trying to optimize the performance of those devices for you. For example, the highest technology level, the Reveal ones, will have 24 different adjustment bands for an equalizer to match your prescriptive targets more precisely using real ear measurement. Contrast this with only 14 equalizer bands inside of the Reveal 4s. However, this does not mean that if you go from a level 1 to a level 2 or level 3 to level 4 that you will lose performance. It just means that there's potential of you leaving benefit on the table, not just now, but into the future as well. But it also does reduce the cost of the hearing aids each time you drop down in technology level, and sometimes this can be considerable. It's also important to understand that it is impossible to identify which technology level would be most appropriate for you based on your hearing loss and based on your lifestyle. At least that's what the research tells us. So my recommendation for technology level is basically the same for everybody, which is you should go with the highest level of technology that you can reasonably afford, and if you cannot afford it, you should drop down to whatever level you can afford, and then it's the job of your hearing care professional to maximize the performance of those devices for you. The caveat with all of this is that how well you perform with the Oticon Reveal hearing aids is heavily dependent on whether or not your hearing care professional follows comprehensive audiologic best practices when fitting and programming your devices. If your hearing care professional is one of the 95% of professionals that does not follow comprehensive best practices like real ear measurements, then it doesn't matter what level of technology that you get because you're never going to maximize the performance. This is one of the reasons why I started Hearing Up, which is my network of hearing care professionals who are committed to following comprehensive audiologic best practices with every patient that they see. So if you want to hear your absolute best with your Oticon Reveal hearing aids, finding a Hearing Up provider on hearingup.com is your best bet. Now, I know that there's a lot of you out there who are interested in the cost of these hearing aids, and what I can tell you about cost is it has a lot to do with a variety of different variables, including where you live, what technology level you go with, what services are included with your purchase, and the quality of those services. If you live in a low cost of living area, you get the Reveal 4s, you don't get a whole lot of services with those hearing aids, and the ones that you do get aren't very high quality, you can probably get a pair of those hearing aids for a few $1,000s. Of course, if you live in a high cost of living area, you decide you want to get the top tier Reveal 1s, you get them fit by a clinic that provides you with ongoing services, and those services are extremely high quality because they're following comprehensive best practices, then you can spend upwards of $10,000 on a pair of these hearing aids. Just remember that the majority of the price that you pay for hearing aids is due to the services you receive, not the technology itself. So the higher the price, the higher your expectation should be for the quality of care that you receive and the results you get. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the range of hearing losses that this hearing aid can treat. The Oticon Reveals can pretty much treat anything from a mild level hearing loss up to a severe and maybe into the profound ranges. This will all depend on the receiver strength that your hearing care professional selects on your hearing aid. So you can go with the 60 decibel receiver, 85 decibel receiver, 100 and 105 decibel receivers. If you use the 105 decibel receivers, you have to use an embedded receiver ear mold. If you need anything stronger than that, you're going to have to go with like an ultra power BTE hearing aid like the Oticon Exceed. As you can see, the Oticon Reveals come only in a rechargeable form factor. There is no battery door on there. It does have charging contacts on the bottom for charging inside of the charger. You should get up to 24 hours of battery life on a single charge, and in my testing, I was easily able to get over 20 hours of battery life, even though I was streaming quite a bit. I've noticed that it takes around 2.5 to 3 hours at the end of the day for this hearing aid to fully charge, and it charges super quick. If you put it in the charger for like 15 minutes, you'll get about 2.5 to 3 hours of additional battery life. Now, Oticon did send me the desktop charger for this review. Nothing fancy here. It uses USB-C charging port on the back, but this does not have an internal power bank, but they do have the smart charger available for these hearing aids as well. The smart charger does store extra charges and has a lid that closes. As far as durability is concerned, these hearing aids are incredibly durable. They do have an IP68 rating for debris and moisture resistance. Of course, just to make sure that the hearing aids I'm reviewing actually live up to these IP ratings, I take them out on the hot Arizona trails to do a couple-hour trail run, sweat all over these things, and see if they make it out alive. And if they're still working by the time I'm done with my trail run, I like to see how they handle the rain. Of course, in Arizona, we typically have to create our own rain, and the Reveals handled all of this with no issues. All right, now that we have all of the more boring stuff out of the way, let's get into some of the more exciting new features, starting with Reveal AI. Now, bear with me here because I'm going to be saying the term AI ad nauseum here for the next few minutes, primarily because AI is trademarked inside of some of the feature names. Oticon's new Reveal AI platform encompasses 4 key features: their 4D sensors, their new Reveal AI Clarifier, the new Reveal Optimizer, and the Reveal Amplifier. Let's go ahead and break down all 4 of them. The 4D sensors are basically the same as what they were inside of the Intent hearing aids from last generation. They use head movement, body movement, conversation activity, and acoustic environment to better determine your listening needs and adjust your hearing aid settings accordingly. Since the 4D sensor is not necessarily a new thing, I'm going to go on to something a little bit more new and exciting called the Reveal AI Clarifier. This is what contains the new dual AI. And when I say dual AI, I am not talking about two AI chips inside of the hearing aids. I'm talking about two separately trained deep neural networks, one that is focused on speech and the other one that's focused on context sounds. Now, just to be clear, the purpose of this dual AI is not to just try to eliminate all of the other sounds in your environment and retain the speech. This is what a lot of manufacturers try to do with their AI. Instead, their goal is to provide the right amount of balance between these contextual sounds and speech while still allowing you to understand speech in complex environments. Remember, if Oticon is going to live up to their philosophy called brain hearing, they can't just eliminate everything around you and focus on the speech. They have to provide you with other sounds as well to make things sound more natural. I mean, think about it. Back when you probably had normal hearing, you could go into a really noisy restaurant and you could still understand the people who were talking to you despite the fact that you would still hear the noise. That is exactly what Oticon is trying to do with their technology. And honestly, I applaud Oticon for sticking with their core strategy because they've been very successful at this since they released their Oticon Open hearing aids about a decade ago. This creates a very specific difference between Oticon hearing aids and other hearing aid manufacturers because despite Oticon giving you the ability to reduce noise in easy and difficult situations in their programming software, you are not going to be able to completely eliminate all noise and only hear the speech. Now, can I personally tell a difference between the Oticon Reveals and the Oticon Intent hearing aids when it comes to background noise? Honestly, when I do back-to-back comparisons, I'm not noticing a huge jump with the Reveals. However, according to Oticon's own internal research, 94% of hearing aid users prefer the speech clarity and the sound quality of the Reveal hearing aids over their previous technology. Now, if you ask me if I prefer the Oticon Reveal hearing aids over the previous generation Intent hearing aids, the answer is definitely yes, but it's not because I received this monumental improvement in speech understanding while in noisy environments. Now, there is something that I do believe is significantly better than the previous generation technology, and that is the new Reveal Optimizer. This feature provides 30% faster feedback prevention, which boosts headroom and stability, so you can get up to 25 decibels of more amplification than other hearing aids. In fact, I have to say that in my experience working with a lot of different brands of hearing aids, the Oticon hearing aids tend to be the best performing devices when it comes to amplifying high frequencies, and one of the biggest reasons why is their feedback suppression. And this is even when using open and vented domes, which would be a significant limitation for other hearing aid brands. And this is based on my clinical observations of testing thousands of different hearing aids using real ear measurement to verify how much amplification they're able to get you in the high frequency ranges rather than just listening to the marketing hype. And these Reveal hearing aids are even better at hitting high frequency prescriptive targets like you see here versus other hearing aid brands that tend to fall short of these same high frequency targets. Now, these Oticon Reveal hearing aids are quite clearly excellent at hitting high frequency prescriptive targets, but how do you determine if that's actually going to benefit you? Well, I have a little trick up my sleeves, and that's called speech and noise testing. Now, when I'm trying to determine if someone should be going with a hearing aid like an Oticon Reveal or some other brand that tries to maximize noise reduction in a different way, I can run the QuickSyn, which is the quick speech and noise test, and I can test you in two different ways. One of them being the standard presentation of the speech information, and the other one being with a high frequency emphasis low pass filter. Now, I know that this is getting a little bit technical, but bear with me here. So when we're doing this particular test, I'm actually measuring your signal to noise ratio loss score. The higher the score that you get on this in decibels, the worse you'll hear in background noise, and the lower the score that you get, the better. That's because a low score means that you need less separation of speech over the background noise before you can understand what someone is saying. Now, let's just say that you have a high frequency hearing loss and I test you with the standard presentation level and you get a score of 10 decibels. That means that you need a 10 decibel separation of speech over the background noise. But if I then run a high frequency emphasis low pass filter and that 10 shrinks down to a 2, now you only need 2 decibels of separation. And the reason why I want to measure that is because I'm trying to determine if you'll do better with a hearing aid that is open fit, where it allows in the natural low frequency noise into your ear canals, but then uses the high frequencies to separate the speech from that that noise. However, if I do a high frequency emphasis low pass filter and you do not have any change in your scores, then it's possible that I could go with a hearing aid that uses more noise reduction but requires a custom ear mold to do it. Now, different providers might have different strategies to determine what hearing aids and how they want to fit those hearing aids on you, but I've found a very high success rate with individuals when I do these two different forms of speech and noise testing before giving them a hearing aid recommendation. But if your provider gives you a high frequency emphasis low pass filter quicksand speech and noise test and you do really good on that test, there's a high probability that you'll have really good success with the Oticon Reveal hearing aids using a rubber dome. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the last component of Reveal AI, which is the Reveal Amplifier. The Reveal Amplifier houses Oticon's second generation wind and handling stabilizer. This preserves speech cues and outdoor comfort with up to 10 decibels of additional wind noise reduction. Just like the Intents did from the previous generation, the Reveal hearing aids do a really good job in wind, and they even handle hair noise really well. Although based on my testing, if the wind is kicking pretty fierce on the golf course, or you're driving with the windows down, or riding your bicycle, you're probably still going to perceive some wind noise. All right, now let's talk about something that a lot of you are super interested in, which is the wireless connectivity. And I have some good news for you, because Oticon definitely has improved the performance of this wireless connectivity in the Reveal hearing aids. The Oticon Reveal gives you up to 32% better range of transmission and 53% better stability of a Bluetooth stream signal. And these work with both Android devices and Apple devices. However, I have to warn you that Apple is not yet using LE Audio Bluetooth, and you can tell. The sound quality and the stability and the range with the Oticon Reveal hearing aids with my iPhone 15 is really bad. That being said, if you don't know how much better the sound quality is with my Samsung Galaxy S25, then just live in happy ignorance with what you're missing out on. I was just at the gym today wearing these hearing aids during my workout, and I was intentionally connecting them up to my different phones and walking across the gym. I could only get halfway across the gym streaming from my iPhone 15 before the audio started getting choppy and cutting in and out and eventually losing connection. But I could make it all the way across to the other side of the gym with my Samsung Galaxy S25 that uses LE Audio Bluetooth, and the signal never cut out at all. That right there is the power of LE Audio. Now, if we're lucky, Apple will come out with LE Audio at the end of the year with their iPhone 18 at this point, but I wouldn't hold my breath. The thing that I don't understand is that my Apple AirPods Pro 3 do a much better job, so there's something that's a disconnect with how these hearing aids interact with an iPhone versus how the proprietary technology of Apple works with their own devices. I will say that I do believe these percentages of improvement from Oticon, but purely with my Android phone, not my Apple phone. Now, if you want to see if your phone is actually compatible with the Oticon Reveal hearing aids, you can go ahead and check out their compatibility on their website. Another feature that's still available is the double tap on your ear to answer phone calls and then to hang up on phone calls. This means that you can be completely hands-free. You do not have to talk into your phone or have your phone to answer if you don't want to. Now, because the Reveals do have LE Audio Bluetooth, that also means that they're compatible with Auracast. Now, as you know, I've been going out into the greater Phoenix area on a weekly basis to make contact with different public venues and encourage them to install Auracast transmitters so they can take the audio from their venue and send it out to anyone who has Auracast enabled hearing aids. Eventually, Auracast is going to replace hearing loops for telecoils inside of hearing aids, but hearing loops are still an important infrastructure that is still available in certain venues, and so having a telecoil inside of the Oticon Reveals is also another nice perk. With that being said, if you do go into public venues like churches, museums, live performance theaters, or movie theaters, and you would like to access their audio directly, you should really go to them and ask them to install an Auracast transmitter. These are relatively low cost to install, and you may even want to donate an Auracast transmitter to your favorite public venue. They are significantly lower cost than having a hearing loop system installed. I will also say that this Auracast feature will also allow you to stream from other devices as well, including television sets that are coming out nowadays. If your TV does not have Auracast yet, they have aftermarket Auracast streaming devices that you can buy on Amazon and hook up to your TV. I've reviewed several of those products on my channel, so feel free to go and search out those videos. Now let's talk about something that I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to Oticon and their wireless connectivity. connectivity, and that is the streaming sound quality. First and foremost, if you're trying to stream audio into your ears using rubber domes on these hearing aids, everything's going to sound flat. Let me give you an example here. If you have a high frequency hearing loss and you have an open dome on these hearing aids because all the low frequencies you can still hear well in your environment and you're just trying to supplement in some mid and high frequency amplification, when you go to stream, you're basically streaming in at that level. So if you're listening to music, you're not getting any of the bass sounds from the music. So what do you have to do? You have to switch to a different program that your hearing care professional hopefully sets up for you that gives you some more bass sounds. But if you're using an open rubber dome, a lot of those bass sounds are going to leak out anyways and you're not going to perceive them. Now, Oticon does have offsets that your hearing care professional can do inside of the programming software, but those offsets are not enough to handle these streaming issues in most cases. One more thing that you can try to do is adjust your streaming equalizer inside of the Oticon Companion app, which will hold until you reset it. And if you're lucky, this will make the streaming sound quality to your liking. Other hearing aid manufacturers have figured out that if you start streaming, you can switch into different program settings automatically so you don't have to constantly be changing your programs to try to get better sound quality. The Oticon Reveals do still use Google Fast Pair, although I can't really figure out the reason why you would want to do Google Fast Pair on an Android phone if you're just going to be connecting with the Oticon Companion app. But maybe someone out there likes it, just let me know down in the comments section, because you could do that with the previous generation technology as well. Now, when it comes to the Companion app, it did remain relatively the same, although I did notice a new streaming filter option that is supposed to cut down on surrounding noise while streaming. However, I can't really tell the difference when I toggle it on versus toggling it off. And they also added a reminder to change your wax filters with instructions on how to do it with several different types of Oticon receivers and hearing aids. Of course, if you want to see my tutorial of the Oticon Companion app, I will link that in the description below for you. And yes, you can still use an Apple Watch with these hearing aids if you're an Apple iPhone user. The app on the watch will let you do a couple of different things like change the different programs, adjust your volume levels, and things like that. All right, let's go ahead and talk about tinnitus for a minute, because the Oticon Intent hearing aids tend to do a really good job of tinnitus suppression if you have a high-pitch ringing tinnitus because of their high-frequency amplification capabilities. You have to remember that approximately 70% of individuals who have tinnitus get a significant reduction in their tinnitus just by treating the underlying hearing loss. I have to point out, though, that this is heavily dependent on how well your hearing care professional programs them for you, because I've had patients come into my clinic with Oticon hearing aids and their tinnitus was horrible. I reprogrammed their hearing aids and their tinnitus got significantly better. Oticon's tinnitus sound support feature is nothing to write home about. You can include some different maskers into your different programs, and you can get a few nature sounds. Most of them sound like ocean waves. If you know my stance on tinnitus maskers, I'm not a huge fan. They are a tool that you can use, but you should never be 100% reliant on them. Now let's talk about some different accessories that are available for the Oticon Reveal hearing aids. And Oticon released a ton of new accessories that are amazing, and that's a lie, they did not do that. They basically released the Easy LE adapter. That is to give yourself Auracast connectivity with other wireless devices that do not have Auracast yet, and that is a nice accessory, but basically all of their other accessories are super old. I think the Oticon EduMic came out in like 2019, and the Oticon Connect Clip is like 10 years old. They also still offer their TV adapter, but I think that that's about the same age as the Oticon Connect Clip. Fortunately, the aftermarket TV streamers that you can get on Amazon that have Auracast are a better fit anyway. Personally, I would like to see Oticon spend a little bit more time on accessories in addition to the time that they've clearly spent on developing amazing hearing aid technology. Now, this next piece of information is amazing if you have single-sided deafness. There is a new CROS transmitter called the CROS RE, and the most important thing about this new CROS transmitter is that it is identical in terms of form factor to the Oticon Reveal. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, previously, the CROS PX that we had to use with the Oticon Intents was a completely different form factor. It was still rechargeable, and it was still a receiver in canal style device, but you could not put them inside of the same charger. The CROS PX had a completely different style charger, so you had to walk around 2 different chargers if you're on the go. And then at the end of the day, when you get back home and you have to take your hearing aids out, you need to put them in 2 completely different chargers. Basically, for the past 2 years, I've been recommending that people go with a different brand of hearing devices if they need a cross or bicross treatment. I can finally start bringing people back into Oticon who have single-sided deafness. All this being said, I've had a lot of time to spend with the Oticon Reveal hearing aids throughout this reveal process. And I now have a very good idea of exactly who I would recommend these hearing aids to and who I wouldn't. The number one ideal candidate for this hearing aid is someone who has more of a high-frequency hearing loss, who wants to maintain more of an open fit and feel of a hearing aid while still being able to get enough audibility in those high-frequency ranges, all while, of course, avoiding feedback issues. They prefer to have good separation of speech from background noise, but without having to completely eliminate all of the background noise to do it. They don't want to have any limitations when it comes to wireless connectivity. They want to be able to stream audio into their ears. They want to use Auracast. They want the newest form of LE Audio Bluetooth. They want a hearing aid app that allows them to adjust different things on their hearing aids. And they want devices that they don't have to fiddle around with too much. There are, however, 3 types of individuals that I would not really recommend the Oticon Reveal hearing aids to. People who want maximum noise suppression, where they just want speech and they want to get rid of everything else. I want to hear nothing other than the person talking to me. Someone who likes a wide assortment of different accessories for their hearing aids. If you're someone who loves a great remote microphone or different type of streaming device, you probably are going to want to avoid these. And if you're someone who is incredibly picky about streaming audio into your ears and you want perfection when it comes to that, you're probably not going to find that with these. If these are the things that you want, this is not Oticon's approach, and you may want to consider a different brand of hearing aids. Of course, I can help you with that. Just go check out all of the other reviews that I have on my channel. Overall, I think the Oticon Reveal hearing aids are some of the best hearing aids that I have ever reviewed. And sure, there are things that I am not a huge fan of, and some things that I think make these hearing aids not good for certain individuals. But if I had to guess, these are probably going to be the hearing aids that I fit the most of over the next couple of years.